It is I. Do not be afraid. Jumping ahead a little bit, Peter needed a little bit of clarity if in fact it was Jesus. So in verse 28, Peter says, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. And in verse 29, we're familiar with the answer that Jesus gives us. Jesus says, come. So what does this tell us, folks, about the joys of the in-between? Sometimes our focus needs to be in the right place for our miracle to happen. If our focus is in the right place during the storm, then we can hear when we are instructed to come. Peter could have kept his focus on the waves. Peter could have looked back at the disciples. Peter could have did a whole bunch of things, could have roller skated on the boat, could have rode his bike on the boat. But no, Peter didn't do any of those things. Peter looked at Jesus. And yes, we do know from this story at some point that the focus changed for Peter, and there were very strong winds, and this change had some implications. And we'll see the implications in verse 30. But when he noticed the strong wind, he became frightened and began to sink and cried out, Lord, save me. So the sinking did not come when Peter was focusing on Jesus. The sinking came when Peter noticed the strong wind. So friends, this is obviously not the end of the story, because our God never leaves us to sink. But we still have to emphasize the importance of our focus. Not in the beginning of when our church began, and not in where we want to go with our diversity and our multi-generational congregation, but where is our focus today? Where is our joy today? How can we usher in the miracle of right now for our church? So folks, the next point that I want to emphasize this morning is that I also want to encourage you to look at the storm. It's okay. It's okay to honor the storm. When we are walking in our journey with Jesus Christ and we are discerning the plan that God has for our lives, we are bound to have some winds, some waves, some storms, some trees are falling down, some storms are coming in from all over. Those things are bound to happen, folks. So when they happen, what do we need to do? What is the best response for us when a storm comes? How do we act when we're looking at the waves and the winds and the confusion and we're caring for our families and we're caring for our children? It's okay to honor that storm. They command our respect. They're asking us to acknowledge us. When a little music plays, we got to honor the music and, a little bit of clap, a little bit of here. But I do want to point out that when those things happen, we didn't get to point B by jumping to Peter being saved. The story still includes that Peter sank. The scripture intentionally did not omit the fact that Peter got frightened. That is part of the story. And not only did Peter get frightened, as I mentioned, but Peter, he sank. Things sank and things got bad. The story could have gone, Peter saw Jesus, Peter walked on the water, Peter never sank, and everything worked out. But again, this story did not progress without the storm. And so when we look again at verse 30, we're honoring that Peter, in all of his humanity, he cried out. Crying out was not omitted in the story to make worship look pretty. Crying out was not omitted so that we can just honor that everything works out okay the first time. But crying out and being frightened and sinking and the storm, these are all included in our scripture. And I just want to read another scripture for you this morning. All scripture is breathed out by